Hey again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Discussions of Darkness. This week, I wanted to touch on something that I think a lot of storytellers run afoul of, and actually players tend to do this too. So if everyone could open up their ears and pay attention to this one, this is an important thing that is really necessary for making these games work and that will keep people enthused. But more importantly, it will ensure that you have the proper emotional impact when you do something big in your storyline. Now, I touched on this a while back on my blog, Improved Initiative, and I was responding to a criticism someone had leveled at my 100 Kinfolk collection. If you haven't read it through, or if you're not a regular viewer of this particular show on this channel, basically what it was is it's a series of supplements for Werewolf the Apocalypse that I had written with high-level games, and it put together, well, 100 kinfolk. For folks who don't play werewolf, kinfolk are people who are related to werewolves, but who are not werewolves themselves. They usually act as go-betweens with the mortal world, and they are kind of the agents that you have. They're your eyes and ears, they're your fire support, they're all the extra stuff that don't require full werewolves, full guru to go out and do. So they tend to be a pretty big part of any game where werewolves are involved, whether you're playing as the werewolves or whether they're your antagonists. And lots of these collections, they were, well, tailored to whatever particular tribe these werewolves were from. So you got them from particular demographics, you got them from particular parts of the world, and you had particular bits of culture in them. The criticism that this individual had thrown my way was there's too many non-quote-unquote normal kinfolk allowed in these tribes. And eventually what it came out was, what this individual was mad about is there were too many trans characters, there were too many LGBTQ characters, there were too many characters that they decided why would they be accepted. These hierarchies, these tribes, they're rigid. Why would they allow these people into their fold? And he seemed to be under the belief that kinfolk, at least in part, should have problematic backgrounds, problematic attitudes. It should be difficult to work with some of them. There should be strain, there should be stress. You should have all those questions about, well, is this person's views, their actions, are they worth working with, even if they're a terrible person? We're here to save the world. You can't always be picky about your allies. And, well, I felt this was silly for a lot of reasons, but primarily the reason I felt this was a silly discussion was, well, these groups of people have existed since the dawn of time, and the world of darkness goes back to, well, the dawn of human civilization. None of these issues are new, none of them are modern, and so the tribes would already have had people of all these descriptions and all these different fill in the blank here for whatever it is that this person thought was problematic. Why would they be so rigid and strange and, well, colonial? If you go back to the history of a lot of these attitudes of this isn't normal, was meant to repress colonial cultures where these things were normal and were accepted and weren't seen as very strange or unusual at all. More importantly, though, this touches on the topic I wanted to talk about today, which is that a lot of us, storytellers and players included, forget that the world of darkness, despite darkness being in the name, needs to have light for contrast. And I am definitely one of those people who wants it to be a horror game. Anyone who's watched this show knows that. But I will also fully admit that if you just make things terrible and dark and dreary and awful all the time, then there's nothing to break that tension. There's nothing to make this more awful than that. It just becomes a series of one bad thing after another, and no one's interested in that. There's no good story to be told there. A good example of another property that does this, which we sometimes see some really good examples from, is the Grim Darkness of the Future in Warhammer 40k. For anyone not familiar with it, the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war is a place where terrible things happen all the time. It is a place where your heroes are genetically engineered child soldiers who have just inducted racism, and they're going out to purge the galaxy of anything with too many arms, too many legs, that doesn't speak the right language or worship the right god. That's pretty dreary, but that's the setup for the minis game, and as a war game, that works fine. But when you get into RPGs, which they have plenty of, or you get into novels or short stories, or even film and TV, as we've seen with some of their recent forays, they're aware that you need to have that contrast. There needs to be at least a striving for something good. There needs to be the potential that something good will happen, because if you don't have that, then the gut punch at the end means nothing. You knew it was going to be terrible this whole time. There's no contrast. It's one of those of you can't tell how far you've fallen if you have no idea how high you could have risen. As a good example, there is a short that they made that I would absolutely recommend you go and watch if you can. It's called The Tithe. The basic idea is that a group of individuals from the Astra Militarum come out to where there's an active war going on. The troops fighting this war are running out of supplies, they're running out of ammunition, they're running out of fuel, they're running out of everything, and they think our protagonists are here to restock them, to give them more ammo, to give them the tools they need to win this war. In fact, they're here to take from them, because whoever is in command has decided, these munitions would be better spent elsewhere. This place isn't important enough for them. And we have these moments of great heroism of people defying orders and standing with these troops and fighting against all odds and helping their comrades get out of this war zone. And then they get all the way to the end, they bring back, the munitions that were requisitioned, and they're told by command, dump them, they're too heavy, we can't actually use them here. And that's the gut punch contrast of we just watched people dig deep into the spirit of standing with their compatriots, of fighting for their allies, of sacrificing themselves for the lives of others. And then that sacrifice is rendered meaningless by just the brute wheels of how, their bureaucracy turns. And that's the sort of contrast I'm talking about. For the World of Darkness, let's say, for example, you were running a werewolf game, and we'll take the obvious low-hanging fruit of you have a player who is a Get of Fenris, and they have a member of their tribe who is a kinfolk who, we're not going to beat around the bush. This guy is a racist skinhead. He's an awful, neo-Nazi, terrible person. But he's part of your tribe, he's part of your bloodline, and he is willing to show up and fight the same people you're fighting, no questions asked. Now, you could have a plot where this character learns, grows, becomes more interesting, fights alongside people different from him, people maybe he had contempt for before, and realizes, my beliefs are kind of, stupid. I am actively hurting myself, I'm actively hurting my cause, and maybe we get to watch this character grow and change. And if we want to give him a tragic send-off or a heartfelt, stab when it comes to that moment, have him sacrifice himself for someone he would have spit on when we first meet him. For those who have seen Mad Max Fury Road, it's that moment where Nux sacrifices himself for something meaningful, rather than just trying to go out in a blaze of glory so that all his boys can watch how cool he was. But if you don't do that, if you just put this character in there just to be antagonistic, you put him there just to be hated, and he's just a problem the whole time through. Who at the table is going to be sad when he gets thrown down a flight of stairs and his skull cracks open? Who is going to be upset when he gets blown up by a bomb or when he gets hit by a sniper? No one's going to care. And that's where we get the contrast. Killing off random NPCs, even killing off PCs, has no point if there's no emotional impact to it. If you had a character that you'd watched go through all that growth, or who was just starting to become a better person, and then the darkness of the setting sucked him down, whether it was he got just killed for no reason because he happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe he had a falling out, with his former squad, who maybe they aren't kinfolk, so they have no idea why this guy's constantly missing group meetings, why he's not as down for, beating up, people that they consider lesser anymore. Maybe he gets killed by the folks he fell in with because, he wasn't getting the validation he needed from his tribe. That has a bit of punch to it, but if it just happens randomly to someone who's terrible all the time, who cares? Now we don't have to deal with that guy, we can find somebody else to replace him. And if you take that and follow the ripples out to the setting, you'll see what I'm talking about in broader strokes. If you have your players and they do all of their actions, they pool all their resources together, they use really smart strategy to defeat a particular enemy or to advance a cause, just showing that, hey, you won for today, but all the progress you made's gone by midnight, so you have to start over again because the world's terrible and nobody cares. That's not going to lead to them being fired up, being more, well, violent, being more extreme. It's not going to lead to them trying to push harder. It's often going to lead to them just feeling, well, like there's no point, like they're just being punished because they tried to do something. And as I said in a previous video when I talked about Noir in the World of Darkness, this can be a very shifty balance. Because on the one hand, the World of Darkness is a terrible place, full stop, no question. It is a place where the alleys are a little more narrow, where the cops are a little more corrupt, where the laws are a little worse, and where everyone is a little greedier, a little more selfish, and a little more willing to look the other way when something bad is happening. But in your story, what are we seeing? What sort of progress could be made? And that's the sort of thing you have to have your players see of what's possible. What could work if they play their cards right, if this goes the right way, if they can get enough people on their side. Maybe they can't save the world, but they could save this person. They could protect this neighborhood. They could topple this tyrant, whatever it is they're facing at this particular moment. And after they've done that, sure, there will be another one tomorrow. There'll be another riot somewhere. There will be another challenge to the prince of the city. There will be another tear in reality caused by a mage who thought that they had taken a calculated risk and were a lot worse at math than they thought. But that isn't going to drive your players forward if all they have is a series of situations where they tried everything that they could and still either lost or their victory was deemed hollow because nothing ever really mattered and everyone's terrible. You need to let them see there are still glimmers through the darkness of what this setting could be, whether it's their neighborhood, their city, their tribe, their clan, their whoever it is. Pay attention to what your players are engaged by. What do they want to see more of? You don't have to have people who are getting together to become, brute idealists who are trying to force the setting to be good. That's pushing things a little too far. But if you have things like you have a player who's, playing the disillusioned enforcer, ask them, how do they get like this? What would give them that glimmer of hope and remind them of who they used to be when they were a soldier, when they were a bodyguard, when they were a protector? And then just give them a little snippet to show that, hey, your efforts matter. You did something in this world. Or, alternatively, if you have someone who's given that hard decision, and they make a selfish decision, or they decide to backstab somebody, or they betray someone because, well, that was the easiest way to get what we needed. Show them what that means. Because if you're playing a game where no one can be trusted and everybody betrays everybody all the time, and it feels very Game of Thrones of you can just never trust anyone and just assume everyone's going to be terrible, you'll never be surprised when you get betrayed. If someone just goes back on their word and sells you out to the powers that be, if someone plants a bomb in the place where your people get together, you aren't going to be surprised by that. You're just going to assume that that's what would have happened because that's what you would have done to someone else. But if you have that moment where you have earned a character's genuine trust, and then you snatch that away, how does that make you feel? Or alternatively, show that this character has been trustworthy the whole time, this NPC that they're dealing with. Someone who genuinely cared about them, maybe who actually loved them, someone who believed in the cause, who fight alongside them. Whatever it is the situation you're in, what would make them betray you? And if they do, what is that impact going to be? Because if you're just expecting that as matter of course, when it happens, you're going to get no emotional through line for it at all. You're just going to have players go, yeah, we were kind of waiting for when that was going to happen. Okay, time to roll initiative. But if you've been through thick and thin with this character, if you've seen them come through for you time and time again, if you have seen that loyalty, honor, these things really matter in this world, as terrible and corrupt as everything is, when you have that moment and realize this person is not immune to temptation, that if the price is high enough, they might sell you out, that can really get under the armor and it can really stab players. Not just their characters, but them. It can give them an emotional resonance, realizing, wow, maybe we shouldn't trust everybody. You know, we thought even in a setting this dark, there was somebody who had our back. But then, you can take it one step further, and you can even twist the knife. Did this character betray them because they were mistreated by the PCs? Were they betrayed because somebody had a friend of theirs, a lover, their family, and it was either betray these people or we'll kill this person you care about? Do you want to show the players that this person made hard choices and they decided you all were the lesser risk? That's the kind of thing that can have a real impact, rather than just being, you know, oh no, Loki betrayed the Avengers again, who could have seen this coming? And because of that, it's not something you should do often. It's not something you should just pull out of your bag every time, because if players know to expect one thing or the other, they're never going to be surprised. But if you show them that they can't be sure, now they have to deal with paranoia of if one character double-crossed them, if one character betrayed them, can they trust the others? Or how long will it take until they realize, like, they're jumping at shadows? And if you look into the shadows long enough, you're going to start seeing witches, whether or not they're actually there. And that is sort of what I'm talking about of, if you just give people an expected result, even if it's all good or all bad, of if you run a game where everyone always keeps their word and everyone is honorable and everyone does exactly what they say they're going to do, that's what your players will come to expect. If you play a game the opposite, where you can't trust anything anyone says, you never know who's running their own agenda, you have no idea when you're going to be betrayed or when someone is going to ambush you, but you know it's going to happen, that also sort of sucks the drama out of it, because, well, when you know what's coming, it can be less engaging watching how you get to that destination. So, something to keep in mind if you're a storyteller, if you're a player and you're running in the game of a game in the World of Darkness or the Chronicles of Darkness, whether you're looking at your character's backstory or you're trying to figure out the next arc for your chronicle, ask yourself, where's the light? Where are the good things? You know, it's like one of those of, if your entire family was killed and now you're on a path of vengeance, did you like your family? Were they good to you? Or are you doing this out of social obligation? Did you really not like them? Were they all terrible people? And if so, why are you willing to put yourself out there to avenge them? It really helps to, well, build up who your characters are, what story you're telling, what themes you're dealing with. When you think these things through and you ask yourself, these are the reactions I want either my character or my players to have. What am I doing to generate those reactions? What am I doing to escalate them to the point that I want them to be at? Because again, if it's all terrible all the time, why should one tragedy be more engaging than another? As the saying went, one death is a tragedy and a million is a statistic. And if you've had nothing but bad your whole life, why is one more bad thing going to really make that much of a difference? Just some food for thought for folks who are thinking about sitting down and running a new chronicle. It's nice to be back on the show, and hopefully I'll be able to keep my technology cooperating with me. But as always, if you have any particular topics you want to see me cover, or if you have particular parts of the World or Chronicles of Darkness you'd like to see get their own episode and hear me answer questions about, or dedicate a whole episode to, let me know in the comments down below. And as always, check out my archives both on DriveThruRPG and on Storyteller's Vault. I'm trying to get back into releasing new Storyteller's Vault content, so I just had a release for Werewolf the Apocalypse a little while ago, and I'm part of something that should be coming out in the next month or so keep your ears open for that one. But until next time, happy gaming, everyone. Thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Discussions of Darkness. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking the video and sharing it on your own social media to help boost the signal. And if you'd like to help us keep the show and channel going, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well. If you have any questions about the topic I covered today, or if you have something you'd like to see covered in a future episode, make sure to leave it in the comments below. Lastly, please check out the link in the video description to browse all of my World and Chronicles of Darkness supplements from Ezekiel Games. So far, we've covered Changeling the Lost, Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Awakening, and Geist the Sin Eaters, in addition to a handful of general supplements that will be useful for any game set in the World or Chronicles of Darkness settings. Thank you in advance for your support. You're the ones who help us keep the lights on, so we don't fade into the shadows.